have you been doing sessions via Zoom or anything like that? Do you have artist liaison?
I've done a couple, like a couple of tracking sessions where I'm on Zoom all day with audio movers and listening that way. But for the most part, I'm mixing, and that's never been attended. I mean, there were some records in LA where people would come at the end of each day, but even that kind of stopped. And every once in a while, people would come, once I was mixing in the box and was doing the whole record at once, they'd come at the end of the record for a day. But even that stopped because it's messier. They're so used to listening where they listen that the notes are really focused and specific. And once they come in my studio and the speakers sound weird and like all this, the mixes where I would be working with the band and they were coming each day to work on each song. The first day they'd hear the tannoys and they wouldn't get it. Like, oh, can you turn on the NS10s? And we listened to the NS10s. And so like by day 3, they were used to the tannoys, but then we'd go back to the first mix. But it would always be, you'd have to go back because they'd get home and listen and say, oh, hey, I'm hearing something. Like, well, that's why I said, don't bother listening at my place. Like, there's no point.
Yeah. So that's a big thing that's floored me a lot this year, which is the frame of reference changing when you switch rooms. And that even with, I don't know if you use the modern technology that do room correction, like Sonarworks and things like that.
Yeah, I don't. That stuff always just sounds really processy to me. So, but that's just me.
I mean, it sounds like very digital and like flattened.
I don't know. I mean, because it's not like they're using, from what I know of the technology of most of those things, there isn't a lot of phase shift. It's not like using a 60-band EQ. It's like this weird digital convolution, single band filter that does it. So it's as transparent as it's going to be. But I just learned my tannoys. I learned the headphones I use, and now I've learned the PMC since I set up the Atmos rig. And so I just know them. And the things I double check on are things like I'll run the mixes through my iMac speakers because that makes it really obvious. If it doesn't sound good on those, it definitely is not going to work anywhere else.
Yeah.
So it doesn't. Yeah, the correction stuff just doesn't work for me, but I know for a lot of people it makes a huge, huge difference. So I'm not advocating one way or the other. It doesn't work for me.
Well, this breaks open there's going to be a kind of theme I'm going to run at in a moment, and it's all to do with the kind of training you were, the kind of training that you benefited from, and the way people figure things out on the fly now on YouTube and stuff. But something I have not heard you speak on, I'm sure you have at some point, is how obsessive do you get about your room setup, positioning, like walls, treatment, all of that stuff?
I don't get obsessive at all. It just really bugs me until it feels like it's right. And some of that is just getting used to the room. Like you go into any new room and it just sounds crazy. And then 2 hours later, your brain's adjusted and figures stuff out because your brain is a huge part of how you hear things and what things sound like. And a lot of it is adjusting to the acoustic space you're in and things like that. So no, I treat my rooms almost visually. I look around the room and say, man, it would probably be better if I hang some carpet on the wall over there. And I do it. And it's like, I mean, maybe it's actually not helping. I have no idea, but it's what I do. And it's always worked for me. My big thing for me when I'm mixing and I'm going to use speakers is I just want the room to be relatively dead, not completely dead, because that's a really weird environment to be in. But I don't want to hear the room. I don't want the room to sound great. Like that's a room you want to record drums in, not a room you want to listen to a mix in. So for me, I just want to hear my speakers. And I've always had speakers that I feel like when I can hear them properly, I know exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah, I do know. I know the feeling of because I work in this room all the time, not to nearly the same level. There's going to be people watching this on YouTube. It's like, why is he talking to Scheps about this? But I got that. I'm early in my career.
It's the same for everybody, but it's the same for it's the same. Insert my pair of headphones for that entire set, like anything, whatever you're mixing on, you just need to know it.
Yeah. And are there mix engineers out there who have to move from studio to studio? And if that happens, how do you get used to it? How do you quickly get yourself in there?
Well, that's the way it always used to be. Nobody had mixed studios at home. I built my own room at home like really early on for mixing because I was working on projects that couldn't afford to pay for studios. So I was mixing at home, and that's just the way it worked. But yeah, that used to always be the case. And so generally you'd have some speakers that you liked and either you'd carry them with you or people who mixed on NS10s, every studio had them, whatever. And then you would just bring, back in the day, you'd bring some CDs of stuff you knew, whether it was your stuff or someone else's stuff, and you'd listen. And while listening, you think you're sort of consciously making decisions, but you're not. What's happening is your brain is acclimating and saying, okay, that's what that sounds like. I know exactly what it's supposed to sound like. That's what it sounds like here. Cool.
So you have...
But that's also why everybody used to check mixes in their car, because that was the same, no matter where they were mixing.